Rope is awesome. So, Nicholas Tanek, I am Nicholas Tanek. This is your kinky friends. I am here. Uh,
Got him back.
he's
Oh, there we go.
he's back on the long lost episode, but find this one. But watch this one now. Rope aficionado. Say hi, my friend. What's up?
Good evening, all.
How you doing? So, for those who don't know, obviously your name kind of does kind of give it away a little bit, which is great. So, because we know what we're getting into. So, you are rope aficionado, and you are a rope aficionado. So, what have you been up to since last time we talked?
A lot.
Yeah.
All over, I guess. So, yeah. I just got back actually about a month ago. I summited Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak in the lower 48. Hiked almost, I don't know, some around 200 miles on the John Muir Trail through the Sierra Nevada mountains for about 3 weeks.
Damn. Speaking of hiking, I started because I'm a big fan of comedy. I started watching Kevin Nealon, who used to be on Saturday Night Live. He's in that show Weeds. He's got a web series called Hiking with Kevin, and he just has a guest that he has Patton Oswalt or other people from Saturday Night Live, and they just walk. They walk around, and it's all they do. They go on hikes, and he interviews them while they're hiking. It's really silly, but it's actually really funny. It makes me want to hike. So
yeah, it's good. I actually met a guy that's been walking for 2 years. He started in West Virginia and ended up in Florida, and then I met him in California, and now he's walking back to Tennessee.
So where do you stay when you do stuff like that?
In a tent.
He's just he's just walking around. Right?
Yeah, no, most of the places that I was at, you were a couple days hike from a road.
Wow.
So it's the longest trail in the lower 48 that's uninterrupted by road. Okay. It's 211 miles uninterrupted by road.
So you're going through the woods. I know a lot of friends. I got a lot of kinky friends who like to tie people up in the woods and like to do kinky stuff in the woods. What is it about in the woods and the isolation of the woods? I think it's the isolation, but it's also outside. What about tying up people in the woods or just doing kinky stuff? I have my friend, the Lady Ascends. I almost said her real name. The Lady Ascends. She her thing is to do fake human sacrifices in the woods like a witch, and she runs after her subs with knives, like naked in the woods. So what is it about that the woods and outside and kind of kink behavior? How does that go hand in hand?
I think the attraction is you're shame free. There's no witnesses except the ones you invite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we live in a society that's full of shame, and when you're in the woods, society's gone, it's dissolved. And I think there's just something hot about nature and something spooky. You don't know what's behind the next tree.
Yeah, you don't know what's behind the next tree. That's true. All right, so what you are a rope aficionado. When was the first time that you when did you start your romance with rope?
At an early age in childhood, I started climbing. And then one of my mom's boyfriend had a sailboat. And I later in life, I realized you have to have a second person to go sailboating. I thought he just wanted to hang out with me. No, he just needed me to man the sails. But I learned how to make a lot of knots. So, and I learned the science behind the knots and why they function and when to use one and when not to use one. And then, I don't know, I mean, at a young age, I was like the classic kid playing cowboys and Indians, and I always wanted to be the person that was tying somebody up. And then, in adulthood is when it actually got more sexualized. I think I was around 19 when I met a girl I was with for 5 years, and just we were young and adventurous, and we kind of fell into a natural 50s lifestyle. And in that time, I also worked at a lion's den. So it kind of opened up our world a lot, right? And especially as we progressed through our relationship and the trust was built, we were allowed to be more vulnerable with each other and tell each other our desires. And some of them desires led to people tied to beds or such.
Now, when you say Lions Den, please explain.
Lions Den, it's one like the second or third largest adult novelty store in the country.
Yeah, just for people who don't know. Okay, so you're with this woman for 5 years. You said you lived a 50s type style relationship. Um, so was it something that you ultimately initiated?
Honestly, no. It was just kind of a natural progression of things. I've always been kind of assertive in nature to some level. I never really thought of myself as an alpha. I've kind of learned and accepted the term sigma for my personality type. Nonetheless, um, I started dating her, and she was very much like the cliche sub that didn't know they were a sub. She was a librarian for the county library, very soft spoken, very conservative, and I don't know, I guess just like through our relationship, she just realized that she didn't have to be conservative, at least in moments.
Oh, definitely. And when you say Sigma male, you mean Sigma or Signa?
Sigma, Sigma.
Yeah. So explain for those who don't know the definition of what is a Sigma male, as opposed
Uh,
to an alpha male or beta male.
so my definition for Sigma is I don't I don't want to take charge, but I will.
Okay, I'm very much like that.
So, if I'm in a group of random people and someone needs to take charge, more than likely I'm not gonna. But if something happened where someone needed to take charge and step up, I will when no one else will.
Yeah.
So it's in my opinion, um, a lot of alpha male tends to be about competition. I'm in competition with no one but myself, and even then, I still lose. So.
Oh my God, I'm gonna steal that. I feel the same way about almost everything in life. I'm in competition with myself, and oftentimes I lose. It's good. I like that. All right. So, what was there like with me when I got into kink because I was always reading, and I was always watching like films, documentaries, movies. But I always read. I read a lot, and I always was like in study hall. If we were in the library at school, I'd always go to I try to find kinky stuff in somewhere, some genre or whatever, right? So, what was the influences that led you to rope? Like, were there certain kind of movies, maybe even songs or artwork or something? Because you had to see it somewhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, early on, the only attraction was that it was something connective that I could share with my partner. It was
Okay.
something that they enjoyed, and I enjoyed bringing them sensation in various capacities. Um, my attraction to Shibari didn't probably happen until maybe 2008, roughly. Um, and that's probably when I familiarized myself with that term. Um, and that was actually after that relationship.
It's just when you said 2008, I automatically thought of like the housing bubble and recession, and everyone thought the world was falling apart. So yeah, why not study Shibari and tie people up? You might as well.
You caught me exactly. Right. Yep. And I work construction. I ran a construction company. So 2008 hit and personal life slowed down and all that other stuff. So I had a little more time and energy to devote to other facets of life.
That's cool. Okay, so when it comes to rope and the rope scene, first of all, and then you got into Shibari. So Shibari is very much like an art form in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what is it about the art of Shibari that really truly attracted you? What do you like about it?
Probably the two biggest things that I'm attracted to about it is the natural authority that's transferred in rope.
Yeah, you're tying
And
someone up. You have authority over that person.
absolutely, if you're 3 foot in the air, I really don't care much about you as a human at that point because you're mine. And I'm not trying to be too blunt or crude about it, but at that point, you agreed to be my rope bottom and I agreed to be your rope top, and you're in there. So whether there's necessarily a long-term authority transfer negotiated, it's just natural when it comes to rope. And not even if you don't necessarily want it's naturally empowering, and it's naturally disempowering. I don't know. That sounds funny. That's probably can't be right. But I think you know what I mean, right?
Exactly.
When someone's hands are tied behind their back, they're very vulnerable. It's very much a place of weakness, but it's a weakness that's chosen.
Yeah, and I remember like literally growing up tying myself up, right? And playing with rope and tying myself up. I mean, like we probably talked about this before. I made a straight jacket out of raincoats and belts. You know what I mean? So, but the element of someone else tying me up, that made a whole difference. It's one thing to be like you feel kind of pathetic to tie your own self up because but to have someone else do it, it adds a whole new level. Obviously, that's how it's really supposed to be done. So I understand there is a kind of connection with the trust aspect of it. So how do you find someone who is trustworthy to tie or be tied?
Research. You should know the person you're playing with.
Yeah.
I mean, on either side, right? If you're a bottom looking for a top, look into them. Most tops and most bottoms, most kinky people, in my opinion, I don't want to stereotype all kinky people, but we love to show off, right? I'm just being honest. We like to show our rope. We like to show our toys. We like to show our bruises. We like to.
That's why people come on this show.
We want everybody to see all our pretty stuff, right? So research and more or less is honestly just go to events. You go get in a room full of people that either want to tie or want to be tied. It's not rocket science. It's simple chemistry.
Yeah. So what makes a good rope scene? And I'm sure you've seen your share of good and bad.
Yeah. Ultimately education is going to be the first thing, right? Rope is one of the most dangerous things we do, especially suspension. Arguably the most dangerous. We can talk about some really reckless stuff, I imagine. Consent. Obviously, I think that's really important for a good rope scene. And then connected people. I think when you get to the right people in a rope scene, it's like a well-rehearsed dance, like a tango. And if you get the right rigger and say he's an expert at the tango, and you find a really great bottom, but she doesn't know the tango at all, but she is an awesome at the salsa, those people aren't going to connect probably. Maybe they can like come up with their own new dance, like an amalgamation of the two. I don't know. I'm not much for dancing, but I think rope can be a dance. And I think that connected people really matter. And then I imagine you probably need some rope or shoestrings or something like that.
Yeah. Shout out to Delilah Naughty Blackfish. She thinks the same way when it comes to there's like it's like a tango. It is, that's what I think adds to the romance of rope. You know what I mean? It's not. Trust and please add to this or correct me if I'm wrong. When it comes to other forms of BDSM like whipping, paddling, spanking, choking or whatever, rope kind of seems actually more. There's a romance to it as opposed to beating the crap out of somebody. You know what I mean? Because there's definitely a trust issue involved. It also there's a beauty to it in the way it looks when the final Shibari artist comes in and they suspend somebody, and the way the ropes are, the way the knots are, the way the color of the rope, how tight it is on the body, what it does to the skin and everything like that. I don't know. It seems as dangerous as you say it is, which I think it is, but it also seems less threatening in a way, as opposed to getting pegged or or scarification or anything like that?
I think it's only less threatening over the last few years.
Yes, I agree.
Social media has blown up. I mean, you have multiple riggers that have 5,000-10,000 followers alone, and then you got some of the big name ones that have 50 or 100,000 followers. Rope is kind of commonplace. I don't know if I want to say commonplace, but it's getting there. It's getting to the point where it's no longer necessarily sexualized. People are seeing it for the art that it can be.
Yeah.
And when it comes to spanking or scarification, as your examples, we can't post that on Facebook. We can't post that on Instagram. But we can post pretty rope pictures as long as people are fully clothed and they meet all other terms of service. And that's where you get so much more acceptance to it, where, oh, this isn't that bad. I mean, like, Facebook grounds me for a stupid meme, but they let the rope picture, it got to be okay, right? Like, and as it just gets more and more accepted, the perceived risk goes down, but the risk is still there.
Good point. Yeah, definitely good point. And when it comes to other forms of confinement, tools, so to speak, to, rope, ties, masks, not masks, I guess you could say in some way, but like shackles, chains, stuff like that to literally, confine someone, to tie someone up in some way, shape, or form. Why do you choose rope as opposed to other things? I'm not saying you don't choose the other things, but obviously you prefer rope.
Everything else is so limited. I mean, to some level, like, I always talk about how all of our play is only limited by our mind, right? And the creativity that we can inject into a scene. But when you put shackles on somebody, you can only really put shackles on one way. I mean, one way this way, but we can put their hands behind their back, behind their head, underneath their legs. You can get creative there, but even then, the list of variables runs out fairly fast. Rope, it's a vast chasm. I mean, look at the TK, for instance. There's probably literally hundreds of ways that are pretty much accepted through most schools of thoughts. You look at a Futomomo, the same thing. There's probably at least 100 variations that it still meets the definition and the criteria of a Futomomo, but it's structurally different, it's visually different, but it still is a Futomomo. So that's my attraction, because, I almost never tie the same tie twice. I mean, whether it's because I grabbed the wrong piece of rope, or I have a different bottom, and their anatomy or their body structure is a little bit different. So that changes the tie. It might look on the outside, from the outside looking in, it might look the same, but there's still the minutia that has to be changed to make sure that it still functions the same way, and aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, definitely. Now, as a top, as a male top specifically, do you ever feel that some people may view you as like a predator in some way because you want to literally tie women up, and stuff like that? Like, does that ever come into play?
I guess it's perspective, like most
Yeah.
things, right? More so, like, once again, that outside looking in. I've established a reputation inside of my community to be a pretty decent person at this point. So inside of the community, I'm welcomed for the most part, as far as I know. Every once in a while, you get somebody that doesn't genuinely have a fundamental understanding of Shibari or even know the term Shibari, and then they would have some negative connotations to what I do.
Yeah.
But that's the history of man. I mean, like, some of us men have quite literally had it beat into us that if we put our hands on a woman in the way that I do, I'm somehow less of a man.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you like? I was talking to Blackfish, and I mean, she was kind of joking around about it, but she's not, in the sense that she does have this need. I mean, it's a fetish for her. She has this need to tie people up, that she wants to tie people up. Me personally, I have a need. I have a need to talk with kinky people. I love it. I absolutely love it. And the more I do it, the more I want to do it. Um, so does that come into play? Like, do you get distracted by rope, or do you see like people and you're like, oh, I want to tie that person up? Like, yeah, like you don't do it, you don't act on it, but it's like,
Yeah.
do you really just like, do you get like urges to tie people up, or to at least like consensually play with somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all get those urges. It's fantasy, right? I mean, like, there's definitely instances where I'm in the public in some form in a non-kinky environment specifically, and I'm like, the things I could do or would do if I had the opportunity, right? But just that fantasy is very tantalizing for me,
I
honestly.
would think I would think that like if you go someplace like a building or something and there are beams like on the in the ceiling, like it's like you look at the building differently than the typical person who's working there. So
Every once in a while, and you get a munch full of rope people, yeah, and they're always looking for the beams and the hard points. Or whenever I'm looking for Airbnbs, I'm looking through the pictures, looking for hard points. So
yeah, that's right. You get a munch full of rope people. You get a rope munch. You should start what you start rope munch. Um, all right, so we talked about what makes a good scene. What makes a bad scene. I'm sure I mean, you've been around, you've been to dungeons, you've seen people play photography stuff, and I'm sure not every scene is up to the way you want it to be. Maybe it's something that you're not involved in, but maybe something you just witnessed. What is a bad rope scene?
um, that goes back to perspective. It's hard to say because what I would say is bad for me might not be bad for somebody
Okay, so
else.
what's bad for you?
So I mean, I think like the biggest thing I can say when it comes to having a bad scene, and any scene, whether it's rope, impact, or anything, is to leave the scene wanting more. It's easy to want more. It's almost impossible to want less.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So suspension. All right, you got the rafters, right? You got the rafters. You have some experience in suspension. Um, how do you make it safe? How do you make suspension safe?
It's never safe. It's all we could do is mitigate the risk factors that are at play, right? Um, like now, 2022, everybody, even for the last few years, 4 or 5 years, has been preaching uplines should be posh or reinforced hemp or something along these lines, these reinforced non-natural fibers. But even me, I've suspended people with jute uplines for a long time, and I still occasionally do. Is that wrong? No, the tensile strength for jute is 200 pounds per piece. If you have at least 4 pieces, that's 800 pounds. It's more than enough to lift a human being. Posh is 1,200 pounds times 4 is 4,800. So significantly safer, but can Posh break just as easy as jute? Arguably, right? It depends if one of your ropes is damaged or there's just a bad spot in the manufacturing process, or who knows, right? So you're never going to make rope safe. All you can do is mitigate that risk. So something big with me, after every suspension, I de-energize my rope, but I'm also passing my rope through my hands and I'm inspecting it. Every single suspension, every single rope I look at every single time. Whenever I go to play, I check my hard point. I check my carabiners, make sure there's not nicks, because that brand new piece of Posh that you're not even thinking about, you got a nick in your carabiner. And when you pull that rope over, it cuts it. So the variables that come into this to keep it safe, once again, it's a chasm. So I don't want anybody to ever think that rope is safe. It never will be safe, ever. Not for me and not for anybody else. And the moment you think it's safe is the moment that someone might get hurt.
Good point. Very, very good point. Now, there's obviously different kinds of rope. Where do you go? You specifically go for the best rope to use.
So the last rope that I bought, I purchased 900 meters of rope from Osada Steve and imported it from Japan.
What makes that rope so much better than the typical rope that you get at Home Depot?
The difference is a machine makes something at Home Depot, and Osada Steve learned from a Nawashi that learned from a Nawashi that learned from a Nawashi that's been passed down how to make this type, this real tight laid jute for who knows, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. But the biggest thing is fiber selection. So the stuff from Japan, it's almost blonde. The stuff from Home Depot, it's going to be like a brown paper bag color. Not to mention the stuff from Home Depot, it's going to be, when they treat it, they're going to use JBO, which is jute batch oil. And it's a byproduct of the kerosene manufacturing process. So not really good stuff to put on your body. The stuff that I got from Japan, it's actually, when they batch it, it's done in vegetable oil. So it's significantly more expensive though, but there's a reason.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, yeah, I can see why. Okay. So, all right. So when it comes to Shibari, but there's also certain safety aspects. Like you said, it's never going to be 100% safe ever. But there are certain kind of things you could do to minimize the risk. It's kind of safety precautions and stuff like that. Or what's the term that they use? You know what I mean? It's basically awareness of what's danger. When it comes to joints, the joints in the body or nerves and stuff like that, how do you play it as safe as you can by protecting the nerves and the joints in your body?
Well, once again, it's just going to go back to education. Most of us aren't medical professionals, and there's not really research on the human anatomy and the impacts from rope, specifically suspension necessarily. There is some data for climbers and suspension hanging syndrome and so on and so forth, but nothing specific to what we do. So the biggest thing you can do is honestly just get on Udemy, which is an online college, take a few courses on nerves, on circulation. I think that most tops should be certified in CPR and first aid. So like I said, education, the more you know, the safer you're going to be. And, going back to the always wanting more, if you can tie at a 10, tie at an 8, right? And this is something that goes back to always wanting more. If I'm tying at an 8, I know I can do more, but I'm a lot safer if I'm tying at 8 versus 10. And if I tie at 8 long enough, then it's no longer an 8. Now it's a 9, but it's still an 8. So I still got a room for safety, because even if I tie at an 8, there's some variable that doesn't come into my head or into my thought process. And now I thought I was tying at an 8, but I'm really tying at a 9 or possibly a 10 because of something that I couldn't predict. I'm not a mind reader.
Do you have a favorite type of knot?
Somerville bowline.
A what?
A Somerville bowline.
What is that? I'm not familiar with that at all.
There's a few different types of bowlines. They're mainly used for shoring tugboats and stuff, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But essentially, it's a knot that will never collapse. So if you make a circle like this, around someone's wrist, and you tie a knot at the top, it doesn't matter if you put a tugboat on it, that knot will not collapse. That circle will never get smaller. The rope will break before that circle will get smaller.
Interesting. This is an educational show.
It's the fundamentals of Shibari, in my opinion. Every single tie I don't like constants. Almost every single tie that I have done in the entirety of my career as a rigger has started with a Somerville bowline.
Okay. So, what makes a good rope bottom? You had a bunch. You like you've tied up a bunch. What like makes it like for you, in your opinion, makes fun to, like good to work with, fun to work
Their
with?
energy, their
Yeah.
energy, right? I mean, honestly, that's the biggest thing, especially for me. I feed off the person I'm playing with a lot, right? I can work with body types. I can work with potential health issues that aren't preventing from suspension. I can work with a lot of that stuff, but it goes back to like having two connected people. If there's no connection, it doesn't matter. Once again, going to the tango, if we both know how to tango, if there's not that shared connection, it's just not going to be enjoyable for me.
Yeah. Now, what's the most amount of people you tied up together at once?
In a single time,
Yeah.
suspended.
Yeah. Or any, it doesn't have to be spent, just tied up.
I don't know. I think I've had 3 people in the air at once. I don't think I've ever had more than that tied on the ground.
So you had 3 people tied. You tied up one person tied up 3 people together.
Yeah, yeah. It was
So
my partner and 2 of her friends, and their boyfriends were in the room.
and you tied them up. So it's like I would think that there's different personalities with each person you're tying. Does that ever kind of get into the? Does that ever kind of mix up or change your approach to it?
Well, absolutely, right? I mean, there's definitely a lot to say about the personality type, and goes to the desire, the intention of what that person wants out of rope. I mean, one of the people that I pay with regularly, they enjoy meaner rope or sadistic rope, and then another person enjoys more of the artsy rope. Um, Not saying that they don't enjoy a little bit of mean or a little bit of artsy or a little bit of this, but they tend to lean one way or another, and maybe even just in that moment, right? So it goes back to the that we're limited by the creativity that we have. So even if someone just only likes mean rope, there's still so much that you can do with mean rope. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think that's the biggest thing is to talk to the person and see what they like. Because I like rope, and I like my core kinks are trust and vulnerability. So as long as you rope with me, you cover what I enjoy, right? So if I can make it an enjoyable experience for you, then that's what I'm gonna enjoy because I wouldn't say I'm like a pleasure dom necessarily. Maybe a fulfillment dom because it's not always pleasurable, it's not always enjoyable, but it's usually fulfilling.
Interesting. Yeah. Now,
So
do you lean more towards the artistic, or I know you want to do what they want to do.
yeah.
It feels right. I understand that. But do you personally lean towards the more artistic side or the more mean side?
Um it depends, honestly, for the most of it. I think I lean towards the artistic side a lot. But even in the mean side, I have a lot of artistic side. I just don't share it as much. Um, there's a lot of beauty in suffering.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A lot of beauty in suffering, and that's where, like, in those moments, I get so lost in that art that I don't even think about taking a picture or even have a desire necessarily. And honestly, just even over the last year or so, I haven't been taking as nearly as many photographs as I used to. I just been enjoying my scenes a little bit more, I think. So
Well, we're definitely going to talk about photographs, but you're talking about beauty and suffering. There is a French movie, and get the French one, not the US one. And there's no rope in it, but it does talk about the beauty of suffering. It's a horror movie. It's called Martyrs. Have you ever seen it?
mm-mm.
Oh, I'm sure I think you can get it on Tubi now. But the French one, not the American. The American one, don't even bother. The French one, the French version of Martyrs is brutal. It's all about people who torture and kill people so they could become martyrs, so they could bask in the beauty of their suffering. Basically, it's a messed up movie, but it's deep. It's a lot deeper than you think. I was talking to Lunatica from France about that. Okay, so let's talk about photography, right? Now, like Delilah Naughty Blackfish, she's loves photography. It's like one of her passions, and like just like rope is. Would you say if you had to choose between one or the other, I would think you would choose rope. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the photography of it kind of captures that moment. When you're done.
It does, and it's like goes back to another of my attractions to rope. It's the natural objectification that happens in rope, especially once a photo is taken, you're a canvas, right? And now you're art, if it's done correctly, and that is just all sorts of deliciousness for me.
Oh yeah, without doubt. And that's what I mean. When it comes to me and writing, like when I wrote, if I write a book, I wrote a book for Lynn who passed away, and I wanted to capture her, right? So it was like I made creating that art like is something I find very beautiful. Just like there's such a good feeling when you step back after a long rope, after like rope play, or like when you set something up, when you tie someone up and you did a good job, you're all proud of yourself. And they can't move, or if they can but they like wiggle, or it's a very interesting feeling. So what cameras do you use?
I just use my cell phone. It's a S22, so it has a 50 megapixel camera. I don't need anything more than that, honestly. So I worked with a lot of professional photographers, a lot of very, very talented people over the years, like insanely talented people. And they have all these very nice cameras and equipment, and a lot of them went to school. And the biggest takeaway out of all of it was composition, right? And scene placement, like lighting. I don't use flashes. I don't use anything. I just frame the picture well and make sure that the body is in a position that is appealing to that body type. And then the rest does itself. I mean, I'll do a little bit of editing. I might like clean out, like you can see my little outlet on the wall behind my suspension area. I'll take that out. But other than that, the picture art's art. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to have thousands of dollars of paintbrushes and the best, paints. You just need to have creativity and the desire to do something.
Abby, how you doing, Abby? Abby does smoking videos, smoking fetish, and okay. I think she's taking a break. And if that's correct, congratulations, Abby. I believe she's gonna have a little Abby, maybe, and she's got to give up her smoking videos for a little while. Congratulations, Abby. But Abby writes, "Hello, what's the difference between the artsy rope and mean rope?" Great, Nicholas. So what's the difference between artsy rope and mean rope, she asked.
Well, I mean, like we already kind of discussed, art is in the eye of the beholder. So you can see art in mean rope. But I think what she's asking is like the artsy rope that a lot of us think of is the stuff that we see in social media. Those really pretty pictures of fully clothed models, very pretty uplines, and, just looks like a Bob Ross painting or something, right? And the mean rope was obviously just mean,
Those little knots.
What's that?
Those happy little knots.
Yeah, a well-placed knot could be mean or not so mean, depending, right?
Oh yeah, because he always says like those happy little trees, those happy little trees. Yeah. So, so Abby says, nope, that's Pam and Bruce. Oh, that's the cuckold couple that she's basically doming and bossing around. And she goes, no babies here. So it looks like we're going to see more smoking videos from Abby. Love you, Abby. Okay, so what are mistakes that people make when getting into a scene, or a Shibari scene? Especially amateurs.
Not communicating enough. not being honest about intention or desire or experience level.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest mistake. I mean, like, I can go ahead and throw myself under the bus, especially when I was, new to tying up people that weren't directly like my partner, that knew me directly. And I never really wanted to say, oh, I don't know you that well. I'm not necessarily comfortable suspending you the first time I meet you. It was hard for me to honestly, like, kind of hold my own boundaries at one point. Just because they know that I have the skill. I know I have the skill, but my comfort level wasn't there. And it took me a little while to figure it out that, my comfortability is just as important as theirs inside of a scene.
Interesting. So Abby, once again, says, love you, Abby. But she's, like I said, she has a smoking fetish. Does with cigarettes or smoking anything, or even fire play, would that come into? Has that ever? Do you have any experience like working that into a rope scene?
Absolutely. I mean, it depends on, once again, where you want to take it, right? I mean, just a couple weeks ago, I was at a dungeon party and I tied someone to, I think they call it like a Jacob's ladder, but it looks like a jungle gym, but it's really stout. I had someone tied to that and they had a candle in their mouth and it was dripping in a well-placed area.
I like how you put that. Yeah. So you're in I guess your studio right now where you could suspend people and do everything like that. Let's say, okay, no, let's say it. I just moved into my place, right? And let's say I have a room and I want to set it up so I can have the maximum potential for rope play in the future. What do I need to set up like some kind of rope dungeon?
Well, I mean,
a rope dungeon. What do you call it? A studio or?
it just depends. I mean, most dungeons tend to have some form of hard point, and then there's also a lot of rope studios or rope dojos that are popping around the country. The difference is when you go to a dungeon event, it tends to be more intimate and play focused, and when you go to like a rope studio or a rope dojo, they tend to be education and then play, right? So there's definitely a different feeling to each of them. And the dojos, they have dungeon nights and everything else, but usually a dungeon is at a night at a time event. And if you go to a studio or a dojo, it's usually during the day and it's usually more educational focused.
Yeah.
But true. So back to like setting something up in your place. The biggest thing is if you own the property or not, right? You don't want to cause damage to a property that you don't own. There's loads of options for that. Bonds of steel. There's quite a few different manufacturers that make portable hard points, essentially like either tripods or swing setups. You can also look into like the different setups that they have for aerial silks. If you have more headroom or you want to do something outside. If you have a house, then that opens up a lot more possibilities. Then you can set up a more permanent structure. With that, you'd want to be able to get into your attic space, and then you'd want to span multiple joists. I don't know what kind of point. So my beam goes from wall to wall, from that wall to that wall, and there's a triple beam behind it. That black bar is a 2-inch piece of steel that has 6 half-inch grade 8 bolts through that and through the triple beam that's going wall to wall. I could probably pick up my truck and maybe your truck or a car with that. So a lot of like when it comes to thinking about safety in this, when you're thinking about load, something that you can go to compare notes is the climbing world. And usually the climbing world is like a 5 times factor. So if you weigh 200 pounds, then you better prepare something to weigh 1,000 pounds before you think about putting your 200 pounds on it.
Now you consider yourself a bratty master. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that. A brat master. I kind of coined a little while ago.
Now, are you mastering your brats, or are you a brat who's also a master?
It depends on who you ask, I suppose. So, long story short, a few years ago, I was in an MS relationship, and about 6 months into it, we sat down to renegotiate like what our roles were to each other, and we were both sat down and spoke as equals, and we're like, this isn't exactly what I want, right? Like I want to be a master, you want to be a slave. That's great, but something's wrong, and something that I liked about this person kind of disappeared, and something that they liked about me kind of disappeared. And after a couple of days of talking about it, I realized that she was a very free spirit. And when we first met, before we got into MS, we had a lot of fun and joked and giggled and laughed. And even in our scenes and our rope, we had a lot of fun. But then when we got into an MS relationship, we didn't negotiate that fun was coming out of our relationship. But both of us, because I was a master and she was a slave, we fit ourselves into this box that was just that domed our own relationship.
Yeah.
And so after a couple of days, we still enjoyed everything that was MS, except the lack of fun. So, we couldn't have fun if we were master and slave. So I became the brat master, and she became a service brat.
Okay.
And it worked very well for a little while longer. So
yeah, because a lot of, especially when it comes to female-led relationships, some people I know, some people they make it work and it's really beautiful, but especially if it comes with like cross-dressing or sissification or anything like that. There's some people where they change so much and they get so involved in that role that the person that they once were when they started, they're not, no one's the same anymore. There are some people who can bounce back. I am one of those people, like, who, I could do kinky stuff with my girlfriend and we could switch back into like normal life ever. I'm not a 24/7 person, although I think about it 24/7. I'm not a 24/7 person. But okay, as you being a bratty-esque master, so what is an example of that? Like, is it, would you, like, when I think of brats, I think of kind of almost throwing a somewhat of a tantrum or something like that, or just really doing things or doing things just to like to make yourself laugh, like dominating them just for your own personal amusement, so to speak. Would that be considered bratty?
let's be clear. What is bratting is defined by the people that are engaging in it. If it's not defined by them, it's unethical. It's not acceptable, right?
Okay.
And we live in somewhat of a culture, especially the internet, right, that thinks it's okay to speak back to a dom. It's not if it's not negotiated. You negotiated to be a submissive. Fulfill your role or negotiate to be a brat. That's fine. Years ago, we used to call them Sams, a smart ass masochist, right? And a smart ass masochist, they talked back because they wanted the punishments, right? Mm-hmm. And that was when negotiated for a fulfilling relationship. Like, I'm going to speak back because I want spanked. I know they want to spank me. It works great, right? That gives them a reason to spank me, blah, blah, blah. It feeds into the dynamic. When it's not negotiated for, it's unhealthy at best, right? So to be clear, like when I say about bratting, I'm talking about fun that's negotiated between a relationship. And you don't have to define like exactly what you're allowed to do. But like a great example is I have someone that I play with that will do fire play. And every once in a while she'll blow up my wand and she'll giggle and laugh, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get you. And I'll light it back up and I'll get her, right? And then she'll blow it out again. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get you. And we'll play like that. But if I say, this is the last time, she won't blow it out. So, and very rarely would I say that, but maybe there was a reason. Maybe we're getting a little too playful. There's alcohol, there's flames, whatever. It's my responsibility to help mitigate that risk, right? And if it's simply that we're getting too playful, we have to stop. But we live in this. A lot of people, when they think of bratting, they think it's just back talking a dom, and that's not okay. It's not okay to treat people like that. Now, if it's negotiated, have fun, do whatever, right? But I just, there's a lot of negative connotation associated with bratting, and I'd like to break it because it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun when two people can giggle and laugh while they're spanking each other. I've hit people with pool noodles and just silly stuff, and have fun. Enjoy your relationship. But it's not fun for a D type or an M type to have insubordination. That's not agreed upon.
That's true. Very good point, because it's like, yeah, I also look at negotiation as something that can be very enjoyable.
It's foreplay.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. As something, and the fact that you found somebody that you could literally openly talk about kinky stuff you're going to do to each other, and what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, what you like, or what I like, and let's try that. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's try that. That's really fun. Like that's part, like you said, it's foreplay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, all right. The kink rabbit hole goes deep. We're constantly evolving. What are some new things that you're trying now, or that you're interested in trying?
I've been playing more with medical stuff that makes people bleed. Mm-hmm. I've read a book a few times, but probably 3 or 4 times ago when I read it. I tend to read books a lot, like good books repetitively. It's Radical Ecstasy by Dozy and Hardy. And there's this one story in there called Skin as a Meditation for Morality. And it talks about how the only thing that defines you or me is our edges, is our skin. The only thing that defines your computer or your keyboard or your mouse or your desk is the edges, its skin. And something about when someone bleeds for me, it's like they're breaking out of their skin and they want to greet me. So it's very, it's I don't even know how to explain it. I don't want to it's very spiritual for me, to be honest. I don't play that like that with many people, but it's very, very connecting once again, trust and vulnerability. And when someone just wants to greet me and all the evil that I have to do, it reminds me that, even though I have some evil in me, so to say, and I have some bad desires by society standards, that when I do it with the right people, that they love and adore me for it. And that makes me feel whole.
Yeah. No, I get that. Definitely. So, okay, we're almost done. Rapid fire recommendations. They don't have to be rope related, but they can be. Recommend a film.
The Secretary.
Love that movie.
It's a good movie. It's classic.
Maggie Gyllenhaal, James Bader.
One of the best representations of BDSM we have in mainstream media.
Yeah, with that, yeah, I'll go with that.
One of the best.
Definitely. Okay, recommend a book. You know, you just did.
Forked Tongue by Flag.
Recommend a television show.
Big Bang.
Big Bang Theory. Okay. Recommend a song.
I don't know. I'm not good with names of songs. Road Trippin' by Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay. Recommend a meal. Any kind of meal.
Sushi.
Yeah. What kind? Oh, there's a lot of different kinds of sushi.
It's hard to pick. I like it all. I know. I always get like a variety, and even when I go, I still usually get something different. I'll usually have one thing that I've gotten before, but variety. I like variety. A lot of variety in sushi.
And Abby goes, love Big Bang.
I like to think I'm like the cooler version of Sheldon Cooper. So.
All right. So we're gonna do our final game, right? This is a new game. I'm gonna say a kink or a fetish, and you have to use it in a sentence. So think of it like a creative writing game. All right.
Okay.
So if I
Like
say
Mad Lib.
kind of, yeah, but it has to be a sentence, and you could change. You can mess up the tense in the plural, singular, anything like that. Okay? All right, ready?
Sure.
Okay. All right, hemp rope.
Oh boy. I don't know if I'm gonna be good at this game. I got my hemp rope from Japan.
Okay, that's fine. It's a perfect answer. Perfectly good answer. All right, suspension bar.
I hoisted her body onto the suspension bar.
Okay. All right, handcuffs.
And then I handcuffed her to it.
Okay. All right, nylon rope.
And then I pulled out my nylon rope.
Okay, square knots.
And seeing how many square knots I can tie on her.
And then Summerhill bowling.
And then I have to untie all them square knots because I was supposed to start with the Somerville bowling.
Oh, okay. It's good to, yeah, to update it. um, okay. Lingerie.
And then I cut off her lingerie.
Wax play.
How about I stuck a candle in her mouth and I watched the wax drip?
Fire play.
And then I got my fire wands.
All right. And finally, someone just texted me this. Water sports.
And then I peed on the candle.
Yeah, to put out the fire.
Well, safety.
Safety first, definitely.
It's not degradation if it's me trying to be safe, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right. So what now? How have you've been doing this for years? I've known you for years. How would you say, as a rope artist, which you are, how would you say you've grown or evolved throughout the years?
Probably the biggest thing is like at first I was very fascinated with the artsy side, and I wanted to learn every tie, and I never did any tie good. Well, never did any tie great, right? Because I always wanted to do everything, and I was really focused on like the artsy, pretty like harnesses, nothing that was suspendable. And now the last few years, I'm very dynamic with my suspension, so I'm very particular on what I use. So I used to tie all this, and now I tie like this, but I'm more dancing, right? Instead of doing all the dances, I'm only doing the tango.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And so what's next? What's next for Rope Aficionado?
I don't know. There's a few things. I mean, I have a few events coming up this month. And then I recently opened up a building on my property that I'm hoping to actually start my own rope dojo here. Just be small space for people in Central Ohio to share and, go from there. So hopefully maybe next month we'll be ready for that.
So what makes a good rope dojo? You've been in a couple. Like if you were going to build and you had your expenses were covered, you didn't have to worry about money or anything like that. How would you build your perfect rope dojo?
The building's one thing, but the people is what really makes it, right? But as far as the building goes, the biggest thing you're going to want is an open floor plan and high ceilings. 9-foot ceilings are, pretty much ideal. Something where you get easy access to the attic, so you can add beams for hard points, and then just have hard points that are solid and into the ceiling.
Okay, and now when it comes to, do you put stuff on the ground, like in case people fall or someone,
I mean, we have crash pads, and depending on what I'm doing, yeah, I'll use them. The reality is they will help, but if somebody actually fell,
it's game over.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna help. I mean, honestly, in my experience, they help most with feet. because people, it's like you just don't think about it. It's a foot, and you like go to drop an up line or you go to move an up line, and someone's foot comes down really hard. And if it's on a hard floor, yeah, it'll hurt. And like I said, there's just not as much respect paid to a foot. Where someone, when they're moving a chest line, if you watch me when I tie, like I'll put my hip underneath of them so that even if my rope slipped, the rope broke, they would hit my hip and my thigh before they would hit the ground. Right.
And when you suspend somebody, right, I would think, and like I'm here to learn, basically, what part of the body, I would think the waist or the chest would be the most thing you'd focus on for a good suspension. Would that be it, or is there different parts of the body?
There's a lot that goes into that. So generally speaking, for most types of suspensions, you want to try to have some kind of upline that's going to hold your load right around mid chest, and then something right around their hips. So if you look at a lot of suspension, a lot of it, you'll see something on their chest and then something on their hips. Because that's going to be tends to be the most comfortable. That's where most of your mass is going to be distributed. But at the same time, like inversions tend to be pretty comfortable. So not that long ago, I just did an inversion. It was 2 gravity boots. So she only had rope around her feet.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. All right, cool. So is there anything you want to promote? Any events coming up? Any like links, FetLife, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok?
I'm Rope Aficionado. You can find me most places. I mean, on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on FetLife. I think I have a YouTube, but I've never uploaded anything because I really don't like our kind of stuff too much. So yeah, you can find me if you want to find me. Not too hard to find. Pretty public anymore. October 29th, I will be doing a Halloween carnival for Nebula. We'll be doing a performance out there in Columbus, Ohio.
That's awesome. Ohio, the Natty. You know what? There was a news article saying that Ohio, I think, I could be wrong, but Ohio is the state in the country that uses the most profanity.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Really? It wouldn't? Okay. All right. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Rope Aficionado. And another quick question. Aaron asked, do you prefer, public places like dungeons or parties, or like the intimacy of just one-on-one or one-on-two? Like, do you like that when you tie somebody up, or do you?
It depends. Honestly, there's sometimes where I can't wait to get to a public event to tie, right? Mm-hmm. But it's really weird because when I tie with someone that I'm really connected with, the whole room just dissolves around me and nothing's there, right? But there is definitely like an exhibition side of me. Like sometimes it makes me a little nervous, or like, the variables that come into play when you're in not your space. But at the same time, like, it's a lot of fun. But I mean, if I had to pick one, I would definitely pick more intimate moments. But I mean, in the right dungeons, there's plenty of intimacy there.
Oh yeah, not a doubt. That's cool. We got to get you to New Jersey. My friend Mr. Shibari and I just opened up Mischief Manor. Yeah, it's a cool little place. So if you're ever in New Jersey and you want to tie some people up, tie some New Jerseyans up, and New Yorkers, or Philly, people from Philly, yeah, go to the Manor. Rope Aficionado, it's been a blast. Love talking. I learned a lot. That's what this is all, for. So yeah, it's getting late, my friends. Everybody, you could go to yourkinkyfriends.com, subscribe to this YouTube channel, like and subscribe, do all that stuff. Patreon.com/YKF. We have a Discord chat group. I'm on Twitter, Nicholas Tanek. Also Instagram at your kinky friends. Instagram as Nick Tanek as well. Yeah, so go out, support kinky people, start tying up people, get tied up. Oh, do you ever get tied? Do you like being tied up yourself?
Not really. Occasionally I'll tie myself and I invert myself. It helps decompress my spine. Mm-hmm. But I'm not much of a bottom for many things. So
Okay. Yeah. I can tell. That's awesome. Rope, stay on the line real quick just to talk, but it's getting late, my friends. My dom is calling me. Remember the cardinal rule, everybody. Be cool, be kind, keep an open mind. Stay tuned. Take care.